From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, well, we are back and we are talking about the clap, so it must be Friday night. This is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and this is your podcast about consumption. My name is John. I am the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and with me this week is the authority on Michigan craft beer and also the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. Sean, how are you doing today?
What's up?
Didn't expect that. Again, Friday night, we're going right to the Budweiser material.
That's right. So, that's my prime material right there. I've just exhausted my entire library of jokes.
Do you need any more jokes if you can quote Budweiser and Scary Movie, whichever one it was, at the same time?
No, I think the trifecta, what is it? Trifecta is 3. So 2. It's
yes,
not
I believe so.
The trifecta minus 1 is complete.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I still like that because, you know, we mentioned our drinking game recently on this show and bringing up things that we bring up often. And as we mentioned at that point, Scream is one of the things I bring up a lot. I like how all this time I continue to use the gif of Ghostface running down the stairs from a piano, like repeatedly. No one's called me out on it yet.
But that is from Scary Movie, right?
It's from one of them. It's not from Scream.
Right,
I know that.
I was going to say, I don't think that's a Scream thing.
Yeah, it's not from Scream, but it is a very comical gif.
Is it GIF or is it GIF?
I say gif.
I do too, but I know some people are, you know, they can be pedantic. I can be pedantic about things. I used that in the text with you the other day. I was surprised you didn't call me out on it.
Pedantic?
Pedantic, yeah.
Yeah, it's very shallow.
As is
so
the
what
usage.
have you been up to this week?
Not much. We didn't actually talk that long ago, just a few days ago. I haven't really, I think I watched the movie for today that we're going to talk about. I feel like I watched something that was, I started watching that, it's made such an impression, I can't even remember the name of it. That show, it's about the dragons, not Game of Dragons. What is a Game of Thrones show about the dragons? What is that show called? Throne of Dragons?
House of Dragons?
House of Dragons, there we go. I watched
Game of Dragons is better.
Yeah, Throne of Dragons is pretty good too. I've watched Throne of Dragons, the first episode I watched, and, you know, why not watch it while it's brand new, right? And then I watched the second episode, I think I'm like 2 or 3 episodes in now. I just kind of watched it. It wasn't anything that I was like, I need to watch something. And it was either going to be Rings of Power or it was going to be Game of Dragons. And I wasn't quite sure which one I was going to pick. And I thought, well, you know, Rings of Power, I'll catch that. I've heard it kind of has started to fall off towards the end of the season. It feels like it's weird that it's only been 10 weeks or whatever since Game of Dragons started. House of Dragons, is that like, I'm going to keep calling it Game of Dragons and I'm never going to remember what it's actually called. And then
Game of Thrones 2.
Yes.
But before.
Pre-electric boogaloo, steam-powered boogaloo. And I've been messing around with Stable Diffusion. If you're not familiar with what Stable Diffusion is, it's an AI tool to make pictures. I've been really spending a lot of time dicking around with that.
Is that where a new logo comes from?
That's where a lot of the new logo-ish kind of stuff has been coming up. I've been doing all this crazy stuff. That's called Midjourney. That's you access it through a Discord server. So you just type in the prompt and then you got to put some qualifiers like whatever, if you're looking for certain dimensions or whatnot. And then the one that I've used locally is called Stable Diffusion. And there's different model sets that you can use that will create different graphics or images. And I've been using the one locally more often. It doesn't give me quite as good results as Bigfoot with sunglasses in a bunny costume, but I type in stuff like "your killer" and it pulls up this crazy shit with like this woman who's like naked from the waist up and a skull is like popping out of her chest. I'll have to send you some of the images. We'll post them in the show notes. How about that?
I like it. I found a picture of a chicken with nipples today. That was kind of weird.
Okay. I'm not even going to ask. I'm not going to ask how you found it. I'm not going to ask how a chicken can have nipples. Were they real nipples? That doesn't make sense.
No,
That would be real nipples.
No.
Okay.
No,
Was it
the
a
picture
KFC
didn't make
tweet?
sense, but I don't believe so. It freaked the other people at the bar out, though, so that's good.
Yeah, I could see that. It would freak me out.
Well, you know, that's what I'm here for, is to freak people out with chicken nipples.
If we could ever name episodes other than the topic of what we're talking about, Chicken Nipples would be a perfect show title.
I mean, if we ever start getting more than like 10 people listening, that might be doable. We'll see what happens. We'll make a note about that.
The spin-off podcast will be called Chicken Nipples.
That could be the beer podcast we were talking about.
There you
Chicken nipples and beer.
There you go.
So you gave me 2 homework assignments based off a project that we were kind of kicking around that, at least for the time being, has fallen through. We'll see what happens. But I still figured I should do the homework anyway, because why not?
I'm highly anticipating what you're going to tell me that you watched, because I have some guesses.
The first one I fell asleep on twice. So it's not due to the movie quality or anything like that. It's due to me being an adult and old and tired and all that shit. So I just sat down on the couch with a drink and done. Can't even blame anything other than me being shitty. But last night, because I got bored with the football game, I put on Killer Workout, and very amusing. So I think I described it I'm sure you have this too. I have a buddy who just talks to me through every football game. Like it's all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And he was going on about something. I was like, I can't talk to you right now. I'm distracted by what I assume is 1980s strippers doing aerobics and then getting dead. That's pretty much all I'm watching right now. And he goes, it sounds like you made a good decision.
Yeah, I think that one's also known as aerobicide, right?
Yeah, they spray painted on the walls of the building several times. So
yeah, because the other one, I like the other one better, and we haven't revealed the title. Did you you said that's the one you kept falling asleep on?
I attempted. I fell asleep before I even really got. I think I got to the title screen and done.
That one is called.
And again, that's not a commentary on the movie. That's a commentary on me. So
that one's called Death Spa, aka Witch Bitch, I think is what it's called. Which that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the grand scheme, but that I really like that movie.
It's next up, but I did see some fun news though. I don't remember why we were talking about Edward Furlong on this podcast. I remember we had a conversation about him early on, but this little bit of news came across my news feed yesterday, and I am 1,000% on board for this. Edward Furlong becomes a werewolf in new horror movie.
He must have gotten a new publicist or gotten a publicist, because I saw an Edward Furlong.
Out of jail? I thought he was in jail.
I don't know. I just saw that he was out and about in a poorly fitting suit. And that was earlier this week or maybe late last week.
The picture I'm looking at right now looks like he is wearing a jacket that he probably stole from the set of Terminator 2 and just kind of overgrew at some point. The zipper is really holding its weight. We'll put it that way. Oh, it's a very well-crafted zipper.
It's not like a suit jacket. It's a jacket.
Yeah, it's like a leather. It's like I don't know, this would be a biker jacket or a bomber jacket. I don't know. It's one of those with the belt that overcompensates.
It has the flap that you can put over, or no?
It's got, yeah, kind of. I would call this like a bike. This looks very similar to the type of jacket that Arnold wore in Terminator 2, but would not have fit Arnold.
Too big for Arnold.
No,
I'm joking.
Just too small for Edward Furlong. But I'm looking forward to this. So, I mean, there's not a lot of detail on this, but it says, I guess the title is The Forest Hills, and his name must be Rico.
It looks like a Rico.
Where'd it go? Yeah, well, I had a really good line here. Let me find it again. Edward Furlong plays a role of Billy, a man who influences Rico to believe that he can become a werewolf. And we hear Furlong transforms into a werewolf. That's all I needed. I'm already sold.
It's got I don't know, at least 2 of your favorite elements. Edward Furlong, werewolf.
I'm content. But that's next year, so I guess we're just breaking news left and right, because this is a news-breaking podcast now.
Yeah,
it's
got the
what
scoop.
We're going to do.
They call us scoops.
I wish I could remember why we were talking about Edward Furlong before, because he's really not that relevant.
You're probably talking about Pecker or something.
Was it the Night of the Demons remake? Was that why?
Yeah, we've never talked about any John Waters movies, so that would be.
We haven't talked about any good Edward Furlong movies either, because he's only got 2 legitimately good ones.
What do you think they are? What's your opinion?
Well, Terminator 2 is unquestionably good in my opinion.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's a favorite, but I think he's legitimately good in American History X.
Oh, okay. That wasn't where I thought you were going to go.
Okay. I legitimately do not enjoy watching that movie. It's just one of those this is just kind of a bum out, like not in a way that I want to be bummed out kind of flick.
Sure, yeah, it's not
But
rainbows and lollipops or anything.
it's a far cry from a feel good story. But I can't say that he doesn't give a good performance in that movie for what it is.
I heard that when that movie was released, they said it was that year's Field of Dreams.
That sounds about right. I was going to go with Pretty Woman, but
I'm really surprised that you didn't say one of Edward Furlong's great performances was Brain Scan.
That's a good point. I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to blame alcohol.
The cause of and solution to life's problems. Isn't that what Homer says? Something like that?
It does, when he is bootlegging liquor. I'm pretty sure Edward Furlong said that too, and then he ended up in a jail cell. So
yeah.
Hopefully he's not listening to this podcast like Rob Zombie does, apparently.
Yeah, that's the other bit of news. Rob Zombie listens to the podcast. We have Rob Zombie. We have Lloyd Kaufman, Edward Furlong. Listen, listeners, you could be in this elite company too if you listen. Oh, wait, you probably are listening if you heard us say that.
Can you imagine being in a room with Edward Furlong, Rob Zombie, and Lloyd Kaufman?
It could be pretty fun.
I bet you end up with a story or two.
I probably wouldn't have much to say, but I think it'd be like a really cool place to be a fly on the wall.
I was going to say, I don't think I would want to say much. I think I would just want to sit there and try to take in as much as I could. Anyway, that's pretty much all I did this week. I didn't really catch up on much else. Like I said, it was the one of the two movies. And other than that, just me passing out on the couch and telling my dog to shut up. You want to get into this week's topic?
Yeah, let's do it. Can you dig it?
So this week we are talking... I can dig it, yes.
I don't know if you heard me.
Screw up all kinds of quotes.
Can you dig it?
Seriously, who made him like the president of, like the king of gangs or whatever?
Dig it. I don't know. 50,000 hardcore members. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, all in gangs of like 8 to 10.
No.
Wasn't it 9 that we're supposed to go with? Okay,
nope, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Yes.
Backtracking. This week we are talking about the 1979 release, The Warriors, which is it's a movie about a street gang known as the Warriors that must fight their way from the Bronx to their home turf of Coney Island when they are falsely accused of assassinating a respected gang leader. Accurate?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what. You must have written this because it says that on IMDb at the very top. Did you write that?
I know you can see me right now, but I swear I was not looking at another monitor while reading it.
I was looking directly at the camera or the microphone or whatever.
Dead on.
Yeah.
We're in the same room. I don't know what you're talking about. Camera. What fucking camera?
I'm on the other side of the mirror.
That's right. So that's the IMDb synopsis that I did not read. I had that totally made up on my own without memorizing or anything like that.
I believe you.
How would you synopsize this fine piece of cinema?
Okay, so I actually wrote my own plot outline. Is that what we call it at the top of the IMDb? I wrote my own, whatever it's called. This is what I wrote.
They don't call it anything on this IMDb, but okay.
Yeah, the thing at the top, the blurb. There we go. After a gathering of the gangs of New York City, Cyrus, the leader of the Gramercy Riffs, is assassinated while proposing all gangs get together to take over the city as they outnumber the police. Luther of the Rogues takes his shot and the Warriors get fingered for the shooting.
Luther, a.k.a. Lars Ulrich of Metallica.
Yeah. You
Fingers.
said that before, but I don't know if I see
We weren't
it
recording
so much.
then. I can say it again now.
I know. It's on the record now. It's on the record.
Okay.
I guess I could see it.
He looks like early Lars, and that's not a compliment. That's an insult, which is a damn shame because honestly, as much as David Kelly is kind of a sleazeball in pretty much every movie that he's in, he's still better than Lars.
He does look like a grade A dirtbag in just about everything he's in. He just has that look. I mean, he might be the nicest guy in the world. I don't know him from Adam, but he has that look about him. And now that he's older, he almost looks creepier than he did in The Warriors.
Well, he's kind of like Greg Henry, that he just has that on the shithead like in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's cast as. In fairness, I think Greg Henry is more likable as the movie shithead than David Patrick Kelly is. But he is, I can't think of a movie that he's in that he's not just like a piece of shit or a dirtbag or whatever other, wonderful adjective we want to call him.
If the shoe fits.
The shoe, the dirt, whatever.
So The Warriors, 1979, directed by Walter Hill. Walter Hill made some of the best movies of the 80s. He helped write this based on a book by Saul Urich. Like we were saying before, the movie follows the Warriors. They're a gang from Coney Island. They go to this meeting of the gangs. They're supposed to send 9 delegates of their gang, unarmed, to hear Cyrus kind of preach from the mountaintop or from the top of a playground or whatever that thing, that's wooden thing he's standing on. And he basically tries...
It's like a box inside top of a sewer grate or something.
It's like a wooden platform, but it looks really... I wouldn't want to stand on it personally. So he's kind of telling these gangs, all the affiliated gangs of the city, of New York City. It's almost... I get kind of the feeling... I mean, this is gritty 1979 New York. So it has this... Walter Hill has this kind of penchant, especially in the 80s, for making these movies that almost feel like they could be apocalyptic in a way. You know, it has this kind of feel like it's a far future, or like not a far future, but maybe like a near future where all these gangs can run the city. So Cyrus is preaching from on high. He's trying to get all these gang members to realize that they outnumber the police. And meanwhile, the police are kind of rolling up on this secret meeting of all these gangs. And there's 1,000 gang members from all these different gangs. And a shot rings out. And one warrior, Fox, sees that Luther fires the shot. Luther goes to turn to shoot Fox. And the lights come up and the police sirens start going. And it's pandemonium. Everybody runs out. Luther points out that Cleon, who is another one of the warriors, that the Warriors and Cleon were the ones that take the shot. Cyrus's gang, the Gramercy Riffs, then kind of beat him up. You don't see Cleon again for the rest of the movie. He just, It's understood that either he's captured or he is dead, and he is not in the rest of this movie. From that point,
his contract has ran out.
He was only contracted for 3 scenes or a scene.
One night.
Luther fingers the Warriors as the perpetrator of the crime, and that, you love that I'm keep saying fingered.
It's a good choice of words.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens. So they get fingered. They get fingered real bad. Like, I mean, they're like getting fingered.
Real deep.
Yeah, super deep, like multi-knuckles. So they put the call out over gang radio in New York City. Hey, boppers, be on the lookout for the Warriors. They did some bad juju at this meeting of the gangs, and now everybody's after the Warriors. They have to bop their way back to Coney Island, which... I don't know my New York geography very well, but one of the Warriors says that has to be 40 or 50 miles from here. And they have to stay on the surface streets. They can take some of the subway. They can take, the trains and all this stuff. They don't even know how to get back. Like, they don't know how to read the map to get back to Coney Island, but it's a struggle. And the entire time, these different factions, all the gangs are dressed a specific way. There's the gang, the Baseball Furies. They're all dressed up like baseball players with like Harlequin makeup on. There is a gang.
I thought they looked like juggalos in baseball uniforms.
Yeah, basically, they all carry baseball bats. There's a gang of lesbians that are called, of all things, the Lizzies. There are the Orphans, who are an unaffiliated gang, who are an independent gang of just kind of...
They look like Ramones outcasts.
The Orphans do?
Yes.
Yeah.
They look like guys who were just dirtbag enough to be orphans, but not dirtbag enough to be the Ramones.
Yeah, and there are some Gramercy Riffs are a little bit, they kind of have this almost like karate gi outfit, and then the higher officers are dressed a little bit more, I don't know, exotic, sparkly, kind of in robes and stuff.
So the Electric Executioners or something like that were at the beginning with the gold jackets?
Yeah, I think, yeah. They don't look, you would think
Something
that they're
like
not,
that,
that's kind of a fancy name because they look a little underdressed.
They look like a bowling team or something.
Yeah, they have like satin jackets on. And the Warriors, they wear vests. Yeah. So the thing that I thought was really interesting, just before we really jump into it, is that all the gangs, I really love the scene at the beginning. It's the first probably 10 to, this movie is only about an hour and a half, so about the first 10 to 15 minutes, all the gangs, they kind of, not all of them, but they show a lot of the gangs. They'll show them going to, I don't know, Central Park or wherever this.
It's like a 5-minute montage of them going to this meeting.
Oh, it's like a 10-minute montage, but they show all the gangs and you can see, or different gangs, and they all dressed in the same motif. The thing that I thought was really cool is they're surprisingly very multicultural for the time. For 1979, the Warriors, for example, are like There's Latinos, there's white dudes, there's black dudes, there's no Asian guys, I don't think. But they're very
Well, there's no obviously Asian guys.
Yeah.
There might be one in there, but
There
not
could
one
be.
where you're going to be like, oh,
of the 9.
yeah.
You're not saying that
Right.
guy is the East Indian guy.
Right.
He's the East Indian member of the Warriors. No, it's just like, oh yeah, that guy's brown. So we're going to guess he's Latino. I don't know. But it's a cool kind of, I don't know. I like that kind of vibe about it, that it's representing all these different cultures in all these gangs. Some of them are more segregated. Some of them, like the Gramercy Riffs, for example, they show a shit ton of them at the end of the movie. I saw like 2 white guys out of the whole like 50 of them that are there. But
That's enough.
I like that the movie treats, the way that I look at this movie, this was like a staple on Channel 50 here in Detroit for, when I was a kid, before I had cable.
Decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was always on Channel 50, like the Warriors, blah, blah, blah. I feel like a lot of, and maybe you'll disagree with me on this, but hear me out. I feel like a lot of Nintendo era video games took their ideas from the Warriors. There are all the scenes, the set pieces in this movie.
You could almost
are
make
like levels.
You could almost make the argument that the entire beat 'em up genre that was really popular from like the OG Nintendo really up until the 64, they're all just like a video game rendition of the Warriors, which coincidentally got a video game on,
I think it was
PS2?
PS3 or in 2006, I
PS3?
want to say, but maybe later than that. But there's like, you could think of Double Dragon takes direct inspiration. River City Ransom,
Streets of Rage.
Well, that's more like Streets of Fire, though. I think River City Ransom and I think Streets of Rage directly kind of pulled more from Streets of Fire, but you get the idea. Renegade. I don't know if you ever played Renegade on Nintendo or in the arcade. There is the main character, the Renegade, looks like a warrior. Like he's dressed like one of the warriors. He has the vest, no shirt, brown pants. So I just like that the kind of structure of this movie is set up in these levels. You could watch this movie and say, oh, this seems like a video game. It's even kind of has these action scenes set up like that. So, really dig about this movie. I think it's one of the major contributions to culture in the 80s and the 90s.
I mean, the movie almost plays like a video game, just like you said, the way that you're kind of progressing from almost like train to train. It's almost like you see several times that these characters go from brawl, street fight, karate fight, whatever they're doing in each particular scene. And then they always seem to end up at a train station and they board a train and then they almost have a breather for, it's like 30 seconds in movie time, but they have a breather between the next stop where they get off the train for whatever reason and have their next level or fight with, whatever group of ruffians wants to fuck with them.
It's like the train sequences are the elevator sequences from something like Mass Effect. It's like the loading screen.
Yeah.
They're loading up the next thing that they're going to go do. So yeah, you can really see some cool parallels between games and movies. And the thing too about this is this whole, almost the entirety of this movie happens at night. It's like, it's dark, but it just lends to that really, like I said before, that really gritty New York feel, like a late 70s gritty New York.
So backtracking, when they're leaving this mega gang meeting, so since we mentioned in the movie, they say it's like 40 miles ish. It would really depend on the route, but according to Google, it looks like you're looking at a minimum of a 27.3 mile route or a maximum of a 33.4 mile route. I don't know what trains are involved in that, and I'd be willing to bet that the train routes have changed since 79?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 79 when this came out. But I guess if you're hoofing it, you'd probably, if you're talking 33 miles, rounding up to 40 probably doesn't sound insane.
Yeah, I'm sure it depends on just like you said, the route they took, but it seems like they kind of did some sidetracking.
And I literally just put in the Bronx to Coney Island. Like, I don't know where I'm assuming the Bronx is more than like a one pinpoint on a map. So it seems plausible. One of the things that always sticks out, aside from, so now that you put it in context of the video game aspect, 100% makes sense. And I'm sure I've kind of noticed that before and just kind of didn't put thought to it. One of the things I always really loved about this movie is just the overall costume design, how everyone in this movie has their group, and everyone, even like the orphans who have the most half-assed costume design out of like pretty much every gang in this, like they literally just have like the iron-on letters on the back of like army green t-shirts to say orphans, and it might be spelled wrong. So I wasn't around I've only been to New York a handful of times, but I definitely wasn't around New York in 1979, as I wasn't even, born yet, which I shame my parents for that. But I would imagine that if you're walking through the streets of New York or any city and just saw these random groups of like 9 to 15 people, depending on whichever gang they're getting in a fight with in each particular scene, dressed in some of these outfits, I don't know if I would think it's a gang so much as I would just think it's a bunch of fucking like young kids being like total pricks and trying to freak people out.
Yeah, one of the really cool, the costume design, like you just mentioned, is one of the really cool aspects about this movie, just because they all have their own identity, and for better or for worse, like the orphans wear their dungarees and, like you said, with their olive drab t-shirts. It's like, okay, well, that was a pretty easy one, but it also kind of reflects maybe the area that the gang's supposed to represent too.
Well, and it kind of, again, they give each one of these gangs like some kind of crazy off the wall fucking name, whether it's the orphans or, like I mentioned, the electric execution, or I might be wrong about calling them that. They all have either like one word names or some kind of alliteration with them, which I really like the idea of these like 1970s, 1980s street toughs. Like, we need a gang name, but it has to rhyme or be like, at least have some kind of alliteration going on with it.
The Warriors and the Rogues are kind of the two simplest named gangs in this movie. The rest all have these really weird kind of random name generator names.
Well, and the Warriors, it's interesting because their costume design is, I would go as far as to say that their outfit is iconic. I mean, this movie is kind of, it's not a B movie, but it's kind of under or unknown enough that like you either know it or you don't. But if you know it, you typically have like a big love for it. Like I mentioned to you before we were recording that I was talking to my wife about, we were going to record on this episode about the Warriors, and she was like, "What the fuck is that?" And then I made her watch a clip of it, and she's like, "You're a moron," which, that happens. Coincidentally, this is like, of all the movies that we've talked about on this show, this is a far cry from the one that I would go calling myself an idiot for watching. But
I know I live in a bubble, but I almost kind of find it funny or odd. I bet if I asked my wife if she'd ever heard of this movie, she probably wouldn't know what it is either. I feel like you have to kind of run in the circle that we kind of, not necessarily run in, but you have to be kind of a film nerd, or you just have to be one of those people that maybe you didn't have cable as a kid and it was on all the time. You're like, okay, I guess I'm watching the Warriors again.
I told her I think it's a guy's movie because my brother-in-law, her older brother, he's a big, like, insane Predator fan. Like, over the last 2-3 months now, like every time I talk to him, he's like, "Oh, fucking Predator," and he's talking something about one of the 8 or 9, however many of those movies there are. And as soon as she told me she's like, "This movie looks stupid." As soon as she said that, I'm like, I guarantee your brother would love this movie. Probably does. Might be watching it right now. This is at like 7 a.m.
Well, I think this movie is one of those movies where you can watch it, where if you do watch it for a little bit and you're kind of familiar with maybe late 70s, 80s to mid 90s cinema, you're going to see people in this movie, actors that you recognize. Michael Beck is the lead. He's
for sure
probably not the most known person in the cast. I would say, well, Mercedes Ruehl is in here in a real short role as like a lady cop, like an undercover cop in the park. We've got James Remar, who's probably one of the bigger actors in this movie.
He's probably the most known guy.
Yeah, like recognizable
because of Dexter.
Yeah. I was going to say he plays Ajax, and he's
and,
Ajax's dad, right? Or Ajax. He's Dexter's dad, right? Or adoptive dad.
He's Dexter's dad. Yeah, he in the show.
Right. Yeah, not in real.
He's in something else that's
life.
pretty big too.
But then we have,
maybe
we've got Lynn Thigpen, who's very recognizable. If you don't know who she is by her name, that would be the boss or the chief from Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, the old PBS show. And one character that I find really interesting, or one one character in this movie. There's a character named Fox. And like I said, he's the character that sees Luther shoot Cyrus. And at the beginning of the movie, he's the scout of the group. And he's very integral into a lot of the early part of the movie. And I don't know if you know this, but in the actual credits, he's not credited at all. And you're like, well, he's a pretty big character in the beginning of the movie. And what happens like about midway through the movie is he just gets tossed off a train, like on not a subway. Well, it might be a subway platform, but he gets.
It's like level 1, maybe level 2. It's pretty early in the movie when he gets tossed. He gets tossed onto a train track and gets run over by a subway car, and they never bring him up again. He gets tossed under a train, subway train or whatever, by a cop, not by another gang member. He gets thrown onto he gets murdered by a cop.
It's the heat of the moment.
And they're fighting. There's never a point where I understand that, but there's never a point where the cop's like, oh shit. They just move on to the next scene.
It's the late 70s, early 80s. But that character, Fox.
It's much like child raising in the 70s and the 80s, where it's like, just go play with serial killers. No big deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's my parents let me play with all the serial killers in the neighborhood. But so the actor was Thomas G. Waits was supposed to be a bigger part in the movie, but I guess him and Walter Hill just didn't get along. There was some kind of difficulty there, and he was fired. But he was such a big part of the movie that they had to rewrite everything after his death. So he's in the first part of the movie like I said, when they meet the orphans, he's the one that's talking to Swan, who is the war chief, the leader by default, because Cleon is the main leader, but they're negotiating with the orphans for safe passage, which that brings up the character of Mercy, which is really the only notable female in this movie. She kind of comes along while the warriors are talking with the orphans, and she basically throws a monkey wrench into their plans. The orphans were going to give the warriors safe passage through the neighborhood because they weren't there to start any trouble. They didn't have any weapons. They didn't want to fight. They just wanted to get through that part of town. And Mercy basically calls the orphans out for being yellow or for being a chicken. She does the little chicken call. And that kind of infuriates the orphans because they already feel like they're not getting their due, and makes this problem for the warriors. And they take the remaining warriors, and along the rest of the movie, basically take Mercy, and especially Swan takes Mercy through the entire adventure to take her back to Coney Island, where she just decides to live, I guess, because it was just so shitty where she was living before.
It's a weird transition because somewhere in their journey, it's never like said or even really acted out. She's just like, oh, this is what I am now.
Yeah, and her and Swan make out, and they're like, she's the love interest, the sole female, other than the Lizzies, of course.
Kinda. I mean, she's kind of got like a dirt stash and this weird like underbite too through the whole movie, which I was like, I feel like a gangbanger could do better, but whatever.
That's not very nice. I mean, that's just what she looks like. That's really rude.
Yeah, well,
but she does look like she has a dirt stash, so I agree with you on that.
So I haven't been fired in quite a while, and I hope not to be anytime soon. But I really hope that if I'm going to get fired, that somehow me getting like forced to reenact my death by getting thrown under a train is part of getting fired. Because I wonder, now that you've said that, because I didn't realize that he didn't get along with the director, and that's why he got out of the movie. But you kind of have to write that like end to the character then, don't you? Like you're like, all right, well, we're going to write you off, and well, fuck you. We're going to throw you under a train.
That's pretty demoralizing, right? And that guy didn't work much, I don't think, after that. Now I think he's a director. He directs like independent film, and he's written stuff. But at the time, he was like a big up and comer. I'm reading right now. Walter Hill saw Thomas G. Waits as the next James Dean. And the director invited the young actor to the Gulf and Western to watch movies like Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden for inspiration.
I've heard that so many times. So like, oh, he's the next James. Fuck off.
Listen to this. This is the next sentence. During the screening, Hill offered Waits a drink, which Waits refused, resulting in a rift between the two that grew worse during the grueling summer shoot. This was during the screening of Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden. And because of that ultimately led to him being fired because he wouldn't take a drink from the director. I guess the movies in 1978, 1979 were a little different than they are these days.
I mean, that is kind of a man law thing or whatever. You don't turn down a drink, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it's that big a deal, but maybe in the
This is the first and last, well, maybe not the last time on this episode I'll do it. We don't crib from Wikipedia. We might read shit on Wikipedia and then kind of regurgitate it once in a while. But I just want to read this last thing. There was the rift between these two became so big. Finally, after 8 weeks into principal photography, when the tension on set between Waits and Hill reached a breaking point, Hill demanded that stunt coordinator Craig Baxley improvise a stunt scene in which Waits' character would be killed. Stunned, Baxley demurred, such a critical scene would take careful planning, but Hill was insistent. I don't give a shit how you kill him, Baxley recalls the director saying, kill him. Baxley found a crew member who resembled Waits and staged a scene in which the character is thrown off a subway platform in front of an approaching train. And that's, they just got him off the movie. Hey, you're out of the movie. Sorry, fuckwad, you're done. It's called tact.
I would love to, take a drink because that's another one that comes up quite often. I would love to hear that framed in 2022 as opposed to it's probably happened like 78 or something like that when this incident happened. I would just love to hear a director be like, that fucker wouldn't drink my White Claw. Throw him off the train.
Both. Throw him off the plane and then throw him under the train.
Yeah, throw him off the plane, under a train. From one to the other. Double hit. 2 points.
What else can we talk about with this? I mean, it's really kind of very straightforward.
It's a super straightforward movie. I mean, the stuff that's fun about this movie is this is a great, it's a beat 'em up. I mean, and I know that's a video game term, but there's not really a better way to describe this movie. This is not an in-depth plot. This is not something that you have to spend a ton of time talking about, like, oh, what are the politics trying to say? That none of that shit matters. I mean, at the end of the day, this is an hour-and-a-half journey of one gang going from point A to point B and fighting the whole fucking way is basically what this movie is.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the genius of it in a way, is that it is so straightforward. It's very simple. Like we've already alluded to, that they have these little train scenes, or they have these little traversal scenes where they're, going somewhere, they're walking or they're running. And that's it's like the loading screen for the next segment of the beat 'em up.
Yeah.
Or otherwise, just wanted to give you an update. Some people call those belt scrollers. That's the common parlance of the current time. But anyways, you're like, I don't give a shit. But I think that's because it is so simple, because it's not necessarily mindless, but it's entertaining. It's really tight. Like this, I know that we talk a lot about movies where it's like, well, they could probably cut 10 minutes here, they could cut 15 minutes there, they could cut 5 minutes. Like, we didn't need to hear about the San Diego chicken in the Barney movie. We didn't need to hear about, whatever else. And
we didn't need an hour of pleasure in the fucking Hellraiser movie or whatever it is.
And this one is just so concise, cut so well. There's it's all thriller, no filler, right? It's all, you're just kind of like glued to it, but you don't have to be glued to it. You can kind of watch it passively, or if you watch it with a lot of attention, you'll pick up a lot of stuff, but you won't really miss too much if you kind of watch it passively. And towards the end of the movie, we get this whole, I think you mentioned the outfits, the warriors' costumes being iconic. I think the one big iconic scene in this movie, we talked about this before we started recording, was the Luther statement of, or he's kind of sing-songing, warriors come out and play, and I'm not gonna imitate it, because as much as I like this movie, this is like my least favorite part of the movie. He's got bottles on the ends of his fingertips, and he's clanking them together, and he says, you gotta say it. You're doing the thing. You gotta say it.
Lars, come out and play.
And I have to agree with you. I think I think the part about that scene that's so off-putting is it's what the movie's known for, and it's not really that cool. And it goes on for so long. Like, there are so many other things in this movie.
It's like a 3-minute scene. 3 minutes doesn't sound like a long time until you're listening to 3 minutes straight of just the whole. All right, come on, Lars.
We get it.
Move your shit.
We get it, Lars. But yeah, so the by the end, another gang member, like a rando kind of guy, comes forward to the Gramercy Riffs and says, "Hey, I saw Luther do this. I saw Luther and the Rogues do this."
Lars.
Okay, Lars / Luther. And see, you're gonna
Lars
trip me up. I'm gonna call him Lars on accident when I don't mean to. But then he fingers Lars / Luther, as being the shooter. And then that's, the Warriors get passage. The DJ comes on and says, hey, we made a mistake. Sorry. You ran for your life and some of you died. And a couple of them got put into prison. Sorry about that.
I don't know. This movie for me, it's just fun. I mean, this movie is one of those movies that I've said, I don't know how many times, I like movies where I don't have to overthink what's going on TV. And I almost feel like thinking about this movie will kind of almost hurt it or cause it to not respond, but almost cause a negative reaction, because there's just not enough there to really overthink about. This is so straightforward and so just kind of, we're going from point A to point B and moving kind of randomly, not randomly, but we're moving in sync, just progressing, that it's one of those movies that you can just kind of put on, have a beer and have a good time with. And, I have that nostalgia with it too, because I would watch it on TV. I feel like it was like every Friday for like a long period of time. And it just it works. It's that 80s kind of guys movie. It's a beat 'em up, kick people in the face and move on and have a good Friday night. Now, you got anything to add before we move into hot dogs?
The only last thing I'd say is the thing about this also is this movie is almost exclusively filmed on location. Like, it was filmed in the streets of New York. When they're on the street, they're on the street. The only exception to that is the scene where they have the fight in the bathroom is a set, right? Where they're like knocking each other through the doors.
See, I would have never known that.
I mean, it looks like a dirty subway bathroom. The only thing that clues you in is how big it is. But other than that, I think that just adds to the, I don't know, ambiance or the feeling of the movie, is them being in this just really crummy, it just has that crummy, like, 80s grit to it that I think totally adds to the movie. So
I think both of us like that, though. I mean, if you were to say, what's one thing that Dewey Pod Monster looks for in a movie, it would be some kind of 80s grit or grime, or just something that makes you feel kind of gross watching it, but in a way that you're kind of enjoying at the same time. And this movie delivers that.
Yeah. Could be it practical effect, be it goopy, oozy, nasty looking creatures,
be it knife fight on a subway.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So what do you give this one hot dog wise?
Before we get into hot dogs, I have two. So I bought these random seltzers that have different cryptids on them. They don't tell you what flavor they are, but in the 6-pack, 4 of them are supposed to taste good and 2 of them were supposed to taste like shit. So I don't really know what I'm getting. Do I want to go with the Goat Man or the Jersey Devil? I haven't had any of these yet.
You haven't had any of them, so it could be good or it could be crap.
Could be good or crap.
I'd go with the Goat Man because I think the Goat Man might be crap.
It is. I mean, I like the artwork on these are fantastic for whatever that's worth. So I haven't had one of those in a couple weeks on the show.
Yeah.
Hot dogs. Let's see. This movie for me, like I said, this is just fun. It's a 70s movie, but it's a quintessential 80s movie in a lot of ways. Like that's the feel that you get when watching it. I, again, am a big fan of not overthinking anything and just kind of watching something for the spectacle of whatever it is I'm seeing. This is a pretty solid entering for me. I'd give it like a solid 7.5 hot dogs out of 10 Electric Boogaloo vinyl jackets. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. If I were going to say, the only thing I would want would be almost, there's part of me that could say I'd almost want more depth out of it, whether it's story, characters, effects. You could almost go in any direction with that. Like you could almost say you want more of any one in particular thing. At the same time, oddly, when I watch this movie and get to the end of it, I don't feel like I'm lacking anything. I don't feel like I needed some over the top gunfight or some, splatterhouse scene where Dexter's dad guts like 15 people because he's Dexter's dad, whatever. It just kind of works for what it is. I do think it's a classic of a sort, but I don't think it's a classic in the same sense of some of the other movies I consider classics like Halloween or Jaws or Jurassic Park, the first one, or, something like that, where it's just like so high up on a mountain that it's going to be hard to knock off.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that you got a valid point with that. For me, for hot dogs, I'd go, wow, a good one, huh?
I don't know what the fuck that smells like.
It's going to be the bad one. It's like Goat Man.
It's like maple and something else. I still don't know what that tastes like, but it's not bad.
For hot dogs on this, I'd give it 8 out of 11. 8 out of 11 leather vests. I feel like kind of the contribution that it's given to pop culture. Like I said, everything's so themed, like a video game level. It moves really quickly. There's not really much that it's lacking. I like the 80s kind of grit, the late 70s, early 80s grit to it. I feel like a lot of Walter Hill movies around this time frame are really very straightforward. You know, they kind of play a lot like video games, and a lot of video games took inspiration from it. Like I mentioned before, Streets of Fire is a big one. That's a really weird movie on its own, in its own right, but we're not here to talk about Streets of Fire. I just like that all these characters, each individual character fills a role. You know, we have Ajax, he's the tough guy. We've got Fox for the little bit that he's in. He's supposed to be like the brains. He's the scout. He's the smart guy. We got a couple tough guys, but
I think they're all tough guys. They're of a gang affiliation. That means you're tough.
Yeah, true.
You don't get into the gang by being the guy who does the laundry.
And like you said, I don't think that there's not one thing I could point to that I'd say that I want more of this, because I feel like that would interrupt the balance. But if I can make one kind of nitpick on this movie, the end is very sudden. Like they kind of get to Coney Island, they see the ocean, they say, when we see the ocean, we always think that we're home. And then the Gramercy Riffs, like I said, Luther got fingered for the crime, the rogues got fingered for the assassination, and the Gramercy Riffs just show up out of nowhere, and they basically dispose of the rogues off camera. We don't see what happens, but I feel like there could have been a little bit more to the story to kind of play out with that part, but it kind of ties it all up in a bow. You know, it's kind of a good representation of the entire story. It moves really quick. Decisions are made, and they're swift. Punishment is made, and it's swift, and it's just like without prejudice. So I think that this is kind of like an essential 80s movie to put in your quiver. Like if you haven't seen this movie and you like 80s action movies, I would say this goes with something like Escape from New York, especially playing with that New York kind of vibe. Sure. So that's why I kind of rate it so highly.
I think it'd be a good double feature with Mad Max or, God, what's another one that comes? Even if you wanted to just go with the David Kelly approach and just kind of pair it with Commando or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're talking two polar opposites. Well, maybe not polar opposites, but two very different movies. But I feel like if you started one, then started the other, you're not going to be disappointed by it.
Yeah, I just like I said, I just like just to kind of add on just a tiny bit. I really just enjoy the feeling that while this is an 80s movie, I watch it now and it doesn't seem like it's an old movie. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a brand new movie, but you're not like, the theme it's evergreen. It's like a theme that can be that can be continually reused. And I like the feeling of, while it's gritty, also having that almost apocalyptic kind of vibe to the city. There's nobody on the streets. You know, it's just these gangs that are out late at night, and, save a few like police officers or the girl running the candy stand or, stuff like that. But for the most part, it feels very isolated. All the characters feel very isolated, and it feels very menacing for them to be walking through the dark streets alone just to get back home. And it's just a cool kind of vibe throughout the entire thing.
Well, and that's kind of one of the things where I don't want to say the lack of, but the simplification of this story, if you went too far into why the rogues hate the warriors or why the baseball juggalos want to just, be baseball juggalos, whatever, you would almost date it in a whole different way. The things that make this movie feel like an 80s movie, even though it's just barely not, it's stuff like the soundtrack and the way they fight and the way the camera moves or doesn't move, for that matter, the effects, all that stuff is what gives it that 80s vibe. If you started, I mean, this might sound counterintuitive, but I've said this about horror movies many times. The biggest problem a horror movie often has is the fucking plot getting in the way. If you went too far overboard on a plot with this movie, it would almost make it feel dated and kind of take away some of that timelessness of it. And I could see myself being like, all right, well, again, this is not a fair comparison, but if you look at like Red Dawn or something like that, the original one, not the one with Thor in it, as much as I love that movie because it's ridiculous and silly and all that shit, I don't have kids, but when your kids watch it, they're not going to, I mean, they might have read a little bit about the Cold War in high school, but they're not going to really know the feeling of the Cold War and like be able to relate to the movie the same way that even like with you and I, like the Cold War was a thing when we were kids. Like at least I wasn't old enough to totally comprehend what it was, but I was aware of it.
Right.
None of that shit really matters in this movie because it doesn't, but it dates itself in some ways, but not in a sense with the plot. So I think that's where we're going to wrap here. We both gave hot dogs. We like hot dogs. I'm not quite sure how the last, 15 minutes of this is going to play out because of some technical difficulties. So we apologize for that.
We need to fire that engineer.
I know. Fucking dick. Goddamn Lance.
Never trust a man named Lance.
I know.
Unless he's a double dragon.
Wait, what? Was there a Lance named Double Dragon?
Contra. Maybe Contra, one of the guys was Lance. I don't remember. I'm editing that out. Fire that engineer too.
I kind of hope you just leave the phrase "I'm editing that out" and don't refer to anything else. Anyway, in the meantime here, we apologize for any technical difficulties with this episode. We'll move on next week and hopefully not fuck up anything. But we implore you to please follow us on all the social media stuff at Dewey Pod Monster, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever else you can find us on. If we're there, that's what it's going to be. Check out our site. It is crap.town, and there's all kinds of cool shit on there, like our old episodes. Drink these weird cryptid beers or seltzer. I don't even know what the fuck I'm drinking. Anyway, drink them. Sean, what do you got going on?
I am not doing much other than the making crazy images on my computer. But you can find all my beer news videos at youtube.drafttherapy.com. Also, reach out to us on the social media networks. Tell us what your favorite 80s movie is and what you like about 80s movies. It can be any genre. It could be documentary. If you're like a big documentary fan and you have a favorite documentary from the 80s, let us know about that. Horror, drama, romance, comedy, porno. Tell us all about it. Reach out to us on social media. You can find me. Don't tell me about your favorite pornos unless you're willing to share with the class at Draft Therapy on all the social media networks.
Man, if we turn into a consumption podcast about 80s porn, that's really going to get weird really quick. I already have to explain why I'm watching The Warriors at 7 in the morning. If I'm watching some 80s porno flick at 7 in the morning.
You got some splaining to do.
Might be. No, honey, it's research, I swear. Anyway, that's all we got for you this week. Have a good week. Cheers. Fuck you, Lance. We'll talk to you soon.
Plug in the wires. Stop tripping over the wires, Lance.
Dick. Gus does not agree, apparently. I should probably go shut him up, huh? He is politicking for Night of the Demons remake with Shannon Elizabeth.
And Edward Furlong, apparently.
All right, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Hey! He might just bark over here now, so we'll see what happens.
What the hell's going on over there? You got a biker gang?
It's probably a skunk.
No, well, that's good news.
They're both barking. There.
Did you close the door?
Closed.
Shut the.
See,
That'll shut them up. Oh wait.
What were you talking about?